We'd like to welcome you out to the commission meeting on May 6th, and we ask you to join us with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item on the agenda tonight is the presentation of the Carbon County Employee of the Month Award, Rose Barnes. We've got a statement here that we'd like to read, and then I'll ask if Barry would come up and say a few words about Mr. Chad Allred. It gives me great pleasure to nominate Chad Allred, our May Employee of the Month. Chad has been employed with Carbon County since February 1st of 2010. Chad always puts forth an extra effort in performing his functions as a janitor for Carbon County. Chad stepped up and worked for a while by himself, and yet assumed an additional responsibility of cleaning the 7th District Courthouse. Not once did he complain about the additional duties, nor complain about maintaining his regular duties. Chad always takes pride in his work and is very proud to be a part of the Carbon County team. He makes every effort to touch base with all the employees and has a deep sense of care and concern for each and every one of us. Chad and his team are working extra hard to help make sure all buildings are meeting the criteria of the COVID-19, and that the buildings are clean and sanitized, not only for employees, but for the general public. Chad is very deserving as an Employee of the Month.
Commissioners, there's not a lot I can add to that, but some other things about Chad is he oversees 2 part-time employees with the janitorial crew, and they together go to 6 different buildings throughout the building. And so it's quite an undertaking that Chad helps oversee with that position. And Chad's the kind of person where it's like you almost feel bad when you ask him to do something, because he goes full bore in doing it. And so he's always hands-on in getting those jobs done. So we all appreciate Chad, so thank you. Chad?
Yeah. Get this around the counter. Go ahead. Chad and I go way back. Good to give you this Outstanding Employee of the Month. Presented, dedicated, and a little bit of something in the back there. So I would shake your hand, but how about elbows? You're right. Thanks, Chad.
Thank you, Chad.
Thanks,
Good
Chad.
man.
Okay. Item number 2 is the approval of the minutes.
I saw no changes.
I have none either.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Minutes pass. Item number 3, consideration and possible approval of an agreement with the local attorneys to provide public defender services. Christian, did you want to address this?
Sure. Commissioners, as you know, we have a contract with a consortium of 3 local attorneys, and they've been providing services to us since 2018 as a group. So also beginning in the summer of 2018, we began to receive funding through the Indigent Defense Commission set up by the state and legislature. They are continuing to provide those services. In order for us to continue to receive grant funding, we need to have this group of attorneys. It's actually 4 attorneys from 3 firms that are providing all the indigent defense services for the county. The terms of the grant that they receive require the county commission to continue the same level of funding from year to year. In other words, if you reduce your funding amounts, the grant amounts that the IDC will provide will decrease. So lately, that amount has been approximately $110,000. Your contribution that you've contributed has been approximately $285,000 that you've budgeted with respect to just the public defenders themselves. So as long as you're continuing to commit that same $285,000 amount, IDC, I believe, will continue to fund the consortium of attorneys by providing them with an additional $110,000 each year. $10,000 of that, I believe, also is primarily for, excuse me, it's $108,600 to be precise. $10,000 of that is for expenses related to transcripts and special investigation services that they might need. So as long as the county continues to pay the $285,000, we do anticipate getting that money from the IDC. The terms of the agreement provide that if for some reason we do not, that the grant is not renewed and we do not receive that grant funding, then this whole agreement will need to be renegotiated, and you won't be committed to it unless there's that IDC amount. So you do see the amount of the funding there of 33,000, something like that, each month that you agree to pay the 4 attorneys. That amount includes the amounts we anticipate receiving from the Indigent Defense Commission. So it's my understanding they're going to commit, but most likely we're hoping they will commit to funding at the same level they have for the previous 2 years. And if we commit to that, they'll continue to do that. The caseload continues to grow each year with the defendants we have. This year, you're going to see a decrease in cases just because of the COVID-19 emergency that's kept more people at home. We have had an increase in certain kinds of cases, but generally I think we're seeing some decrease in the number of offenders that are being arrested and prosecuted. So there is going to be a lighter caseload this year, but we anticipate that once things resume, we'll get back up to near the levels we've been. These attorneys are all very well versed in handling public defense matters. They all zealously represent their clients. They do a good job. The public should know that all of our public defenders, you've made it a requirement that they have physical offices here in town where they can walk in and make an appointment. They've got local phone numbers at which they can be reached. And so public defense is, it's not a popular subject often, but it's one that's received increased scrutiny nationwide over the past few years as we've looked more and more to see what can we do to make sure those who are indigent, those who have the fewest resources, still receive excellent attorney services. And with the commitment you've made in the past to funding it at the level you have, and now with the additional sums that the IDC has, we have 4 public defenders, and in my opinion, they receive excellent, very zealous representation. That's been my own observation as the county attorney. And I don't know if you have any concerns or comments about the kind of representation that's been provided, but I think they provide an outstanding and necessary service, and it is proper that they do receive adequate, not just adequate attorneys, but excellent attorneys, and I believe that's who you have in this contract. So you see the contracts with the firm of Oliver and Citrid. That's attorneys Robert Oliver and Thomas Citrid with Clifford Law Offices. That's Shane Clifford, and Blackburn Law Offices, and that's Travis Blackburn. Those are the attorneys who make up this group. Otherwise, other than modifying the contract, IDC did bump up the contract slightly in the middle of the previous grant period, which is why the numbers are slightly increased from what we've seen in the past. And that was partly because the legislature required that every defendant that goes into juvenile court has an attorney for any court proceedings. So the burdens placed on them increased, and IDC increased their funding a bit, which is why the amount has gone up slightly since then. Also, the attorneys no longer provide appellate work, but despite the fact they're not providing that appellate work, their caseload has gone up, and when you combine their increased caseload with the increased workload from the juvenile court, they estimate that their workload has not really decreased just because they're not doing appeals now. So they would submit to you that that amount is fair and adequate for the services they provide, and I believe it's a 3-year, I think it's a 2-year contract with a renewable term of another 2 years.
It's the 30-month term.
Well, it should be 24 months.
It says it goes from July 1st of 2020 through December 31st of 2022.
Okay, yeah, you're right, 30 months, yes, so 2.5 years, so that the goal is to get, thank you, Commissioner Martinez, that's correct. The goal is to get these contract renewals based on the year end in the future.
One question, the last page of the agreement breaks out the amounts. Are all 5 of the line items, the dollar amounts, a monthly fee? 2 of them say they're monthly and the others don't.
They're all monthly fees.
Okay.
Those are all monthly amounts.
Okay.
And just for the record, it's $31,866.67 a month for the services.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The only other thing I saw on this too is, as far as the dates and contract modification, it's got just the date of 2019 on it.
Oh, at the bottom there?
Yeah, just at the bottom of section 14.
We better fix that. So I'll reprint that page before you sign it then. I think we ought to make sure it looks how we want. That's at the bottom of which page?
Page 7, it's part of
Okay.
14, the date of
Thank you.
14.
Good catch.
Any other comments?
I don't have any comments. I'll make the motion that we approve this agreement with the local attorneys to provide public defender services.
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Item number 4, consideration and possible approval of the contract with the Southeastern Utah Association of Local Governments for funding of the Carbon County Senior Center Director.
Commissioners, I'll go ahead and take this one. Christian can correct me where I go astray. So this is our agreement for services to have the AOG, specifically through Robbie, be the director at the senior center. I can't remember, is this the year we bumped up? So this is an increase. We did budget for it in our budgeting process last year. It's basically a 60-40 split with Emery County, because Robbie does director of Emery County Senior Services. This did save us some money, but because we have the larger population, we pay a little bit more, 60-40 split. And as far as I could tell, Robbie's doing a fantastic job at the senior center. The seniors really like him. They played mariachi music yesterday as they served meals to those that came and picked up their meals and drove through, and they had their sombreros on. And Robbie's doing a great job, not only with the seniors, but also the staff. The staff really likes him. I think this is a valuable contract.
I second that. Thank you, Robbie, for what you do.
Yeah, I think every time people go out there, every time we visit, everybody's smiling, including yourself and the staff, so really appreciate all your efforts there.
I'll make a motion to approve the contract, the interagency coordination contract with the AOG.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Item number 5, renewal of the County emergency declaration due to COVID-19.
Commissioners, we passed a declaration back on March 18th, acknowledging that we were in an emergency situation for the purpose of making sure we were aligned with the state's declaration of emergency and making sure we're staying eligible for any funding that might come available. The declaration, the state's emergency declaration has not been rescinded. We're under different guidelines now than we were previously, but since that time of our declaration, we've had 7 cases here in Carbon County, coronavirus cases. We're still following guidelines that impose restrictions on our citizens and our businesses that are having an impact economically and otherwise. So I thought it appropriate for you to continue to declare that we are in an emergency situation. We're operating under different guidelines, and by doing so, we can make ourselves available for support and help and whatever resources might be out there because of our emergency situation. It's become commonplace to think of the fact we're used to being under these restrictions, but there's still a strain on the way we do business here. And so even though we're getting used to them, they're still different, and I think we ought to put ourselves in the best position we can to make sure we're getting the resources we need.
Christian, could you maybe review what guidelines we're following now?
Sure. So now we're under the state of Utah set up a commission that makes recommendations to the governor, and those are called, there's a document called the Phased Guidelines for the state of Utah, and we're now in what's called the moderate risk phase, or the orange phase. It's been reduced from the red phase to the orange phase. So as of today, there are no orders, there are no local health orders that are applicable to the state or to the county. The county is following simply the directives of the governor that he made in his emergency or in his executive order on April 30th, which was to go to these orange restrictions. So it does allow certain hair salons, certain pools and gyms to reopen. It allows limited restaurant lobby business with social distancing. It allows groups of 20 or fewer to get together. So restaurants can reopen if they can maintain social distancing inside. Other groups can get together with 20 or more people, or sorry, 20 or fewer people. Employees who cannot maintain social distancing at businesses are required to wear masks, as are patrons who visit those businesses. They can be required by the businesses to wear masks. So if you have a business and it's the kind where social distancing can't be maintained, wearing a mask is mandatory. So these are some of the guidelines we still have to follow. And if the public needs more information on those, they can reach out to the health department. The health department has links to all that information on their local webpage.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I guess the key is that we have not imposed anything on the citizens of the county. We're following the health department guidelines, and now the state guidelines, we're just following them. And
That's correct.
this
Yeah.
emergency declaration has nothing to do with those. It just makes it makes it available for us to be able to get the federal funds.
That's a good and important point. Yes, the county is not imposing anything additional beyond what the state's imposing, and the local health department's not imposing anything additional beyond what the state health department is imposing. So that's an important point for the public to understand.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask Christian, do we need to read this in for the record, or are we good just to?
I think you can
Accept it.
simply sign it. I don't think you need to read it. I think it's okay.
Okay. Nope, that's good. I'll make a motion to approve the renewal of the county emergency declaration due to COVID-19.
I second that.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item number 6, review state auditor's fraud risk assessment. Seth, did you want to talk about this?
Yeah, just briefly, this is a questionnaire or an assessment that the state auditor asks us to fill out each year. It relates directly to ensuring that we have proper checks and balances and that we quickly have the necessary separation of duties when it comes to our accounting and handling of funds. The assessment has a number of questions that it asks. We're to answer them and then present it in a commission meeting, and then we're ranked whether we're very high risk, high, moderate, low, or very low risk for fraud. As I've discussed with each of you, we did fairly well on the fraud risk. We're considered a low risk of fraud. There are a few areas that we identified that we'd like to work on, and those refer more to just a few written policies that would be good for us to have. Most of them that the state auditor suggests we have in place, but there's one or two that would be wise for us to put together and have as a written policy. And then one of the other items that was discussed is having a fraud hotline. We've discussed doing that in the past and looked into that. We haven't put one in place yet, but plan to very quickly. So if you had any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I don't have any questions for you, so
Okay.
do we need any motion on this? It's just an
I don't think so.
information.
Okay. Thanks, Seth.
It's a good reminder, I guess, for focus and the potential of, as we see, not often, but from time to time, there's other municipalities that have had monies come up, and then businesses locally that we all kind of know have had money come up missing. So I guess it's a good reminder to focus on the potential of fraud out there. So appreciate your efforts.
There's definitely a good reason that the state auditor has us review this and fill it out each year and then present it in a commission meeting. Yeah, there's always a risk, but hopefully we're doing our best to mitigate that and make it as slow as possible. So we're trying to do that. Thanks.
Thanks, Seth.
Seth, what's your timeline on having those items in place, the fraud hotline and the other issue?
I think we'd like to have it by the end of the month. Yeah,
Okay, so soon.
to 30 days. So yeah, right in there. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 7, consideration and possible adoption of resolution 2020-06, approving the creation of the Carbon County Economic Development Board. Ms. Vigor, would you like to address that?
So this last legislative session, SB 95, Senate Bill 95 was passed, which basically changes all of the Governor's Office of Economic Development's programs that they have within their office, like Rural Fast Track Grant, the Bear Grant, and eventually the Enterprise Zone will change because of SB 95. So that bill passed through both the House and Senate, and the governor signed off on it, and so here we are. In that bill, each county can potentially receive up to $800,000 in funding. Initially, $200,000 can go to each rural county, and the counties can use that funding as they see fit for economic development efforts. According to the guidelines of the bill, of course, you can't use it for just anything. There are certain categories that it can be used for. In order to qualify for that, the county has to create a community economic board. or Community Economic Development Board. And so, and it would be set up just like the other county boards, like the Planning Commission and the Special Service District and all of those, where they have to follow, they have bylaws, they have to be appointed by the commission, they have to follow Open and Public Meetings Act. And so that's where we're at. The application for the $200,000 in funding opens on June 1st. And so in order to complete the application, you have to submit the resolution that I've brought, or that I've sent to you guys with that application to qualify for the funding. So that's where we're at. The board itself has to, according to statute, has to have representation from specifically 5 different sectors. There would be a county, someone from the county government, someone from a city government, workforce development, someone from the private sector, and a member of the public that lives in the county. And so we would send out an application or a notice in the paper to receive applications, and the board would have to have at least those 5 members make up the board. You guys can do more than that if you see fit, but as a minimum, we have to have those 5. I talked to Christian about preparing an advertisement for the paper and receiving applications and possibly approving those at a future meeting to get the board set in place. I did talk to GoEd, and what they'll ask in the application is that we submit the resolution that was passed, which is what I'm hoping to get passed today, along with a list of the members of the board that were approved and appointed by the commissioners. That's it. Any questions?
I think it's important to note that the first $200,000 will go to all of the counties that are eligible, but then you have to apply for the other $600,000, and that there's not enough money in the total pot, that not all of the counties are going to receive everything that they've asked for. Nope. So we've been looking at the option of doing a joint application with other counties, Emery, those that fall under our AOG, Emery, San Juan, and Grand, to hopefully strengthen and get more money to our community. So it's not a guarantee that we're going to get $800,000
No.
just for Carbon County to spend on economic
Highly
development.
unlikely.
It's mostly unlikely. We will get the 200, but the other 600,000 just for general information is a competitive grant.
It's extremely competitive, yes.
Throughout the rest of the 29 counties.
The rural counties.
Or the rural counties,
Mm-hmm.
so 27.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's exactly the point. And I did talk with Commissioner Jensen earlier, and he asking, if he had any questions that I needed to prepare today for, and he asked to explain that the funding that GoEd is using to fund the new program, the SB 95 program, is the BEAR funding that we as a county have received, and I presented to you to submit for funding with the BEAR group, or the BEAR grant through GoEd. We have the BEAR group here locally that has received funding from that grant as well. And then Rural Fast Track Grant is the grant that businesses can apply for. We haven't had a large number of businesses who've received that grant, but we have had a few over the last few years who've qualified and received that grant.
So those funds no longer available.
Correct.
To come directly to those 3 organizations. Correct. One's the AOG, the other is the BEAR group locally, and then the BEAR money that the county received.
Yeah, as well as
those all go away.
Correct.
And now the 200,000 that we get, that's the same money, but it will have to be distributed with the help of this newly created board.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then also the Rural Fast Track Grant would eliminate, so that program would no longer be available.
Okay.
Enterprise Zone will continue for a short time, but that eventually will be phased out as well.
So it's important to understand then, I guess, that this board has very specific duties, statutory duties. In other words, they're not a general advisory board, except to the extent the commission wants to make them such. In other words, they're tasked specifically with helping for this rural grant, right? Rural community grant.
Yeah, so they would assist and advise is the way that the statute reads, in applying for and dispersing the.
So we have some other local boards, right, that have helped with some committees and things that have helped with economic
Yes,
development. This board does not have to replace those, correct?
correct.
Okay.
They would just, this board would serve a legal purpose. We can keep the Community Economic Council in place to do as it's been working. This would be, and any of those people could apply if they fall within one of those categories as well. But this serves as a specific responsibility assigned by this bill that's gone through.
Yeah, so I'm sure there'll be some spillover benefits by having this group, and they'll be helpful probably in ways other than just applying for the grant because of the nature of what they're looking into and the expertise they bring. But this will be the primary thing that they'll be asked to do.
Yes.
In essence, they're not replacing the committees we have in place.
No.
They're here to help recommend to us as a commission what that $200,000 should be spent for.
Correct. And then it helped with possibly applying for additional funding the additional funding is project specific and very competitive, but yes, they would help in that process as well.
And that additional funding, was it 3.2, 3.4 million that everybody's trying to vie for out of that pie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it is very limited.
Yeah, so 3.4, if they gave away $600,000 grants, which that's just the maximum, you'd look at just over 5 grants that they could give for the whole state, all of the rural counties.
So it will be very competitive, and odds are counties are not going to get the 600,000, or even clusters or groups of counties.
I don't know, honestly. I think that my understanding is right now the Governor's Rural Partnership Board is developing the criteria to help judge those competitive applications. And so I know that they've sent out and asked for any input on what we as economic development people in the state believe should be included in that criteria and grading. And one of the suggestions that as you know, we worked with some of within our AOG was that, you know, if there's a regional approach, because we feel like a region is stronger when you work together, that should be a criteria within that application. So it's all new, and it's all gonna it's gonna be very interesting for the next little bit.
So as a follow-up, from this point forward, there'll be an ad put in the paper advertising the county needs applicants to turn in an application to apply to be on the board.
Correct.
In one of those 5 areas.
Yep.
The commissioners will then choose 5 or more if we want to create the board.
Yes.
Moving forward.
Correct. We, so I can prepare the ad based off of the description that was given from GoEd to describe what the responsibilities and structure of the board is and all of that. I'll work with Christian, if that's okay, to kind of get through that. And then if you guys could just let me know which agenda you would like that on. I was hoping to have it either the next one or the beginning of June, so that we have everything set in place and 100%, so that when we submit that first application, we have everything that's needed for it, if at all possible.
Would that first meeting in June work best? That give you enough time?
I'm gonna look to Christian for that.
You mean for for what part?
To
Appointing
appoint.
the board.
Appointing
Sure.
the board.
Yeah, I'm sure we could get that done by then.
great with
Your time, the notice in the paper, how long do we have to run that?
There's no legal requirement, but I think
Okay.
we'd want to get started next week, get it out there so that it's running in next week's paper.
And if we-
And then we could have it run twice if you'd like. I think that would get the word out there.
So if we had the applications, a couple weeks, have the applications required by the end of the month, so we'd have a chance to review them before the June 5th meeting, I
Mhm.
believe.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that would work.
Can the members of the board be appointed before a commission meeting and begin meeting
You probably would have to have a special meeting to do that.
to do that?
But you wouldn't have to, all you'd have to do is notice that meeting up by giving 24 hours notice to the media. And so it wouldn't be difficult to do, but I think you do need to make that decision in an open public meeting.
Okay.
And I think that when I talked to GoEd, and because I asked him, I was like, well, what am I going to have done before then? And is that group going to have to have met before that point? And he said that from what he had seen, it was going to be that we needed to provide the resolution and the name of the board members at that point for the application.
Then we have till the end of June to turn in a
Application.
application for
Mhm.
the additional funding and for the 200,000.
Just for the 200 is till the end of June. The other funding, they don't have a timeline yet on when that's going to be available, from
Okay.
what I've been told yet.
So they wouldn't need to have met to try to
Mhm.
decide on a
Nope.
project to set as a priority
Correct.
before the end of June.
Right.
It seems like maybe the 1st of June's a little tight, but if you need them in place by then, I would say let's try hard to do that.
Okay.
Have
And I'm
a
happy to get
commission
that
meeting.
ready so that Christian can review it by the end of the week so that we can have it in next week's paper. And then it would just be just like any other board, the applications that we've received in the past, and I would have them sent to Jeannie and have her keep track of them so that you guys can review them before that meeting.
And this is all kind of new, like you said. We don't know how often that board is required to meet, if it's monthly, quarterly.
Yeah, no,
I don't think there's a formal requirement. Just as long as they meet as necessary to make the recommendations and check all the boxes that are needed to advise you.
that's what I couldn't find anything specific
Okay.
about that either. We do have to have the bylaws approved by the commission as well, which is part of this resolution as well, correct?
Yeah, the resolution states it instructs you to start developing those bylaws,
Okay,
and I'm happy to help you with that as well.
okay. And I can have those set to be approved if we need to have those
Yeah, we
approved
can get those
officially.
ready to be approved at the June meeting also, where we appoint the members.
Okay, very good.
I have no further questions or concerns.
None here.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2020-06, approving the creation of the Carbon County Economic Development Board.
I second that.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you,
Motion
bosses.
passes.
Thanks, Rita.
Thank you.
Item number 8, discussion and possible approval of sale or disposition procedures for the old senior center building. Commissioner Jensen, did you want to address this?
Yeah, I could talk about it. We had in a commission meeting approved the option of, if we had not received an acceptable proposal in our request to the community clear back in November, December, January, of what to do with that building, that we could move forward with demolition of the building by April 1st. And since that time, we have had a little bit of interest in the building. We ordered 2 commercial appraisals for the building so that we had a benchmark to be able to legally sell it. We received both of those back. The appraisal of the two averages at 400,000 for the building and the property. And so rather than moving forward with the demolition of it, it's probably wise for us to advertise one more time for requests for proposals of someone to purchase those buildings, and weigh that against tearing the building down. If there's someone that has interest, I think it would be better to leave the building. And so the thought tonight is to make a motion to advertise again and include in that advertisement the what we're expecting, that we probably have no real expectations moving forward. If somebody wants the building, we'll sell it. If the sales price is acceptable and they can do what they want with the building. There are 4 parcels of property associated with this building. There's a large parcel that the building's set on. There's another fairly large parcel that's a parking lot. And then there are 2 smaller parcels a little bit further to the east that could easily be separated and sold separately. So in the proposal, I think it would be wise to make sure that in our request that we have the ability to break those 2 parcels out separately and sell as a separate building lot as an additional item to sell.
So my thought, commissioners, would be that because it was appraised with I believe all 4 parcels, that if you did, suppose you received a bid that exceeds what we've determined to be the fair market value by these 2 appraisals we obtained, which is $400,000. So if we got a bid in that amount or over that amount, and it included a bid to buy all 4 of the parcels, would you be willing to sell it for that amount in excess of $400,000? Would you be willing to sell all 4 parcels?
Yes, I
Okay.
would.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll write the bid notice that way then.
If it comes in less, then that would give us the option to break that out. And
Right, or if somebody wanted to bid, we could also allow them to bid on just the building and just the building separately, and they could bid on the parcels to the side of it separately as well. Okay,
that might
Great.
be a way to, well, would it be better to do them totally separate or try
Well,
to
I
include both at the same time here?
I think we could include them both. I don't think that'll be too complicated. We can just indicate they have the option of bidding on the full amount and bidding on them separately. I think you ought to reserve the right, if you do not receive a bid that meets fair market value, that does not meet or exceed the $400,000, you would retain the right to do whatever you'd want to do with these properties. In other words, you could sell them for less than fair market value, you could hold on to them for a while, you could demolish the building as you've discussed, and then proceed to try to sell it or develop it. But I think we ought to, my recommendation would be that your bid notice indicate that if somebody, just because somebody's a high bid, if they don't meet fair market value, they're not going to necessarily be able to buy this property, even though they're the high bid. And I think the public needs to be aware of that. It's not just going to go to the high bidder if it's not over $400,000.
And one other thought that I've had that might be important is when we get those proposals back, we probably should include Price City in our discussion about how to move forward, particularly if we need to know a little bit about the who's purchasing it and what they might intend to do that would affect Price City, so that we're including them in our discussion. So
We've had some interest in this building, like Commissioner Jensen said, and if I remember right, this building is not on the historical register.
It is not.
There's some folks that remember it way back in the day and call it the tavern and whatever, but it would be nice if somebody could come up with a plan, could purchase it, could make it a really cool building, but it might be a challenge for them as well to purchase and then do some of the renovations that are needed. So hopefully we can find the right person and make this a go, but we'll just have to see how it turns out. So, any other discussion on this?
So I guess maybe just one last comment is just that the options that are before us, one is to sell it. I think we're not going to impose any requirements on who buys it. The other option is to tear it down. We know that will cost us money, and so what we have to weigh is the value back to the citizens of the county. What's going to be the best value there, and also if the plans of somebody to come in there are not going to be able to help improve that corner, that ought to weigh pretty heavy on what we do too. Because it is kind of a blight, even though it is a cool looking building, there's parts of it that are they're not real inviting as people drive into our community. So I'll be happy to make a motion, I guess, that we advertise to ask for proposals to purchase the building. That would include a sales price, and that we include in that proposal, or in our advertisement, the $400,000 average of the appraisal of the building, and all the items that you've talked about and we have an example in front of us, I think is adequate, that you've already typed up. And that we, I guess, how long do we want to advertise before we ask for these to be back? We hadn't talked about that.
Do we want to give it a month? Is that adequate time?
I think so.
I would be good with a month.
Okay, so a month from next Wednesday, when it would go in the paper? Jeez, I don't have a
Well,
calendar in front of me.
You know, if it started running in the paper next week, I guess it's closer to, and we have our meeting on the 4th. So that would still be 4 Wednesdays away. So if it began to run on the 13th in the paper, then our next meeting's on the 3rd. So it's not quite a month, but it's three weeks there.
Do we want to go to the 17th then?
I don't know that we need to. It's up to you. If you'd like to go out that long, that's fine.
I guess my personal
up to you.
feeling is I would rather give somebody plenty of time to try to pull something together. Because it's possible they'll have to get financing lined up, and there may be efforts and work that's got to go in. So maybe the motion would be to include the 17th of June as maybe we need those proposals to us the day before that.
Sure.
And open and read them the 17th in our regular commission meeting.
Perfect. Sounds great.
I'll second that motion.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you.